Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started here, but please continue to help yourself to refreshments. We know there will probably be a few more people joining as we go, but we want to make sure that we're giving our panelists plenty of time to talk this morning. Good morning. I'm Liz Irwin, Government Community Relations Manager for Duke Energy, and I'm also the Vice President of the Ellettsville Chamber Board. It's great to see so many of you here today to hear from our panelists as we learn more about the growth taking place here in Ellettsville. We have all seen the changes taking place as new businesses and housing developments locate here, and local policies and plans shape the landscape in the county and here in Ellettsville. As the voice of business in the Ellettsville community, the Chamber is uniquely positioned to bring together members of the business community and local leaders for important conversations like the one we are having today. Our discussions today will also allow for some audience Q&A, so be thinking of your questions, and we will try to get to as many of them as time allows. And now, I'm pleased to introduce Nicole Plunkett of Smithville to introduce our panel.
Thank you, Liz. Like Liz said, I'm Nicole Plunkett with Smithville. I'm VP of Commercial Sales. I lead the sales team and represent Smithville in situations like this. So, a little bit about Smithville. We're 102 years old. I know many of you know us well. We serve 17 counties. We have a commitment to serve rural communities, to get fiber to where it's needed most. And so briefly, I tell people that if you know anyone who has the opportunity to choose fiber services from Smithville, please ask them to do that, because the more people who choose Smithville for services, they are helping us get fiber to those who desperately need it. Okay, so our moderator today is Joyce Poling. Joyce is a respected community leader with a long history of public service and dedication to local development. As a former Monroe County Commissioner, she has spent over 2 decades advocating for economic growth, education, and community well-being. Her leadership spans county government, community health, economic development, nonprofit, board service, and Ivy Tech Community College, where she has made lasting contributions to the region. Let's clap for Joyce. Our panelists today include Michael Farmer, Ellettsville Town Manager. Michael was born in Ellettsville before there were satellites. He graduated from Edgewood High School in 1969 and worked in the local pool hall from 1964 to 1969. He was hired as a laborer for the City of Bloomington Utilities in 1970 and retired from CBU as Superintendent of Utilities in 1997. Michael joined Bynum Fanyo Utilities as a partner and Director of Operations for Ellettsville Utilities in 1998. He says he was tricked into being Ellettsville Town Manager in 2019. He has plans to go surfing and never wear long pants again sometime in the near future. So, Michael, if you could join us. Thank you. Jen Pearl is the president and CEO of the Bloomington Economic Development Corporation. Jennifer Pearl has been part of the Bloomington regional community since 2007. She has family, work, and educational ties across the region. She came to BEDC from the Indy Chamber, where she served as Director of International Programs, overseeing the implementation of the Metro Indianapolis Global Trade and Investment Strategy for the 9-county metro region. Before that, Jen was a senior consultant with Northhead, a public affairs and strategic communications agency based in Beijing, China. She conducted policy analysis and public affairs campaigns for multinational clients doing business in Asia and trade across international markets. She has strong ties to Indiana, having managed global partnerships for 5 years at the Indiana University School of Public Health. Jen began her career at National Public Radio in Washington, D.C. She is an alumna of Indiana University, where she received her Master of Public Affairs and Master of Arts in East Asian Studies, and Syracuse University. Let's welcome Jen. Ron Taylor is the principal Taylor Seifker Williams Design Group. So Ron is a principal and partner with the Taylor Seifker Williams Design Group, who brings over 30 years of experience in the landscape architecture, urban design, and planning industry in positions ranging from technical design to project management. Ron has had extensive experience in visioning and helping communities create the tools needed to help them implement their vision. Ron has been involved in the master planning of the 100-mile Louisville Loop and was the primary author of the Indy Greenway's Full Circle Master Plan, a plan that outlines over 250 miles of trail throughout the greater Indianapolis area. Most recently, he oversaw the visioning, development, community engagement, and overall design of the 60-mile Monon South Rail Trail conversion in southern Indiana. Ron was principal who managed the Envision Ellettsville Vision Plan and the subsequent comprehensive plan and unified development ordinance that resulted from the plan. He was also engaged with the design and development of Stewart Park and Ellettsville Heritage Trail, projects that were identified in the Envision Ellettsville Vision Plan. Ron is a registered landscape architect in Indiana, Michigan, and Kentucky. Ron is a fellow in the American Society of Landscape Architects. He is a past president of the Indiana ASLA chapter and past trustee for the American Society of Landscape Architects in Washington, D.C. Let's welcome Ron to the panel. And now I'll turn things over to Joyce Poling.
Let Ron get seated because I think he's first on our list. So you're going to be number one. Excellent. So we're going to talk about Envision Ellettsville and the process and the priorities that came out of that.
Okay. Well, I think we're sitting in a friendly audience. I recognize lots of Envision Ellettsville faces out there. If you were involved in that process, could you just raise your hand real quick? Okay, so we have a few people here that maybe some of this is new. So I think what I would start out by saying with the Envision Ellettsville is that Ellettsville's in a pretty unique position specific to its geography. Being so close to Bloomington, there's obviously growth that's going to happen. There are, some people look at that growth as a threat, but there's others that can see that there's an opportunity there. And I think that that was really the impetus of the Envision Ellettsville plan. It was put together with the idea of asking the community the question, what is it that you want to be? Whenever growth happens, there's sort of two ways for it to happen, right? There's sort of the organic method, which it just sort of starts to happen and people arm wrestle about what things look like and what things are going to be. Or the second option is you plan for it and you dictate the terms that you want growth to happen, the way that you'd like to have that growth to happen. And the Envision Ellettsville process was really the first step in that. So what I would say about the process is it was definitely community driven, one of the most community driven plans we've ever done. We had a 25 member steering committee that was engaged right from the beginning in helping to make decisions and provide feedback and give direction to the plan. There were numerous opportunities for community engagement, whether they be public meetings or small group meetings. There were a whole series of stakeholder sessions, and these stakeholder sessions were pretty fun to be a part of. They focused on different aspects in the community, and that would be everything from local business leaders to one of my favorite was we talked to the high school students, and we talked about what it is that the community wants to be. Like when you get out of school, what brings you back to your community? So. And then we also had some very specific interviews with business leaders, with the school district, with others that were going to be impacted and affected by what that growth was. So in the end, I think that what we found was that there were a series of themes that when we looked at all the public feedback we got, there was a listing, a set of different types of themes that started to emerge. And those themes included things like quality of life issues, connectivity issues, character development issues, what is the visual character of the community, and started to, when we put all those comments into one of those categories, we really started to see what some of the priorities for the community was going to be. We went through a visioning process then based on that, so that we've engaged the community in defining what will the community be in 10 years, what will it be in 20 years, and we challenged them to write vision statements and to develop goals and objectives for the project that were a little bit more about how they saw the community being in those time periods. So instead of saying we want sidewalks and we want, trail systems, we talked to them about the idea of coming up with goals and objectives that dealt more with, I want to live in a community where I can walk to local businesses, to where I can walk across town, where I can do things. So if you take a look at the final document, I think what you'll see, the visioning statements and the goals and objectives of the project are very much geared towards the future. So throughout the community, there were a series of projects that were identified. And so if you imagine, if you were part of this, there's big maps with, hundreds of different projects, everything from very small things to major, projects that needed to be implemented, as well as some of the types of projects and tools that would be required in order to implement those things. But one of the things that the document included, it's one thing to look at a map and to be able to see all these things and see how input is starting to be connected to a capital improvements plan or a town strategic planning. But one of the things that the steering committee really wanted to look at was, how do these things get applied to different types of development? So the plan does include what we sort of called our big, kind of the big issues, or the big picture. And so we looked at four different areas of the community and tried to imagine or vision what would that look like in 10 years when it was fully developed out. So we looked at the area that was downtown, the central business district, and we looked at what was going on with the flood control project, the types of development that could happen because of floodplains, and looked at a scenario that would build that out and start to meet all the different thematic criteria that the community had developed. And we did the same thing for 3 other areas that did different types of land uses. So one of the areas we looked at was north of town, which was an area that we think will become future residential. So we wanted to see how these big ideas and these themes applied to residential developments. We looked at the area out to the west, which is starting to become kind of an industrial park. The industrial park was a pretty unique challenge because when you start talking about quality of life issues, you don't normally associate that with a warehouse or a production facility like they have out there. So some very interesting things came out of that whole area, looking at how new industrial or manufacturing could be combined with multi-use and housing and places to gather and all those types of things. And then the final area we looked at was on the other side of town, out on the southeast, the area between Bloomington and Ellettsville. There's some areas out there that inevitably are going to develop, and so if it maintains, its commercial type of development, then what would happen and how would it look once these were applied? And there's some pretty interesting things there. Not only can you go to the plan and look and see how those big ideas applied, but there's some aerial renderings, there's some different things that start to illustrate that if the vision became a reality, this is what you could expect 10, 20 years down the road. The other thing that's probably the most impressive to me about the Envision Ellettsville plan was it was very heavy on implementation and the number of different projects and tools that were identified for implementation. And I would say that this community is probably has one of the more vigorous programs at going through that implementation process. A lot of times we see communities get these plans and they see a list of all these projects or all these things that need to be put in place, and it's pretty intimidating. It gets put on a shelf and people have to really struggle to figure out, how is it that we're going to implement all of this? Well, this group took off right from the start. So there was a task force or a series of task forces that were developed to talk about implementation and to lead that effort. There were projects that, some of the projects were already underway, but they were sort of in their infancy and they were brought in under the Envision Ellettsville umbrella, which gave them a little bit more oomph and a little bit more push. And what you're doing is you can look around the community today and see some of those projects actually starting to take form, whether it's the facility here or Stewart Park or the Heritage Trail. Like, there are physical things that are happening that were talked about extensively throughout that Envision Ellettsville process. The other thing that was pretty critical to all of this was the vision plan is one thing. It's a nice document that starts to outline what the community wants to be and where they want to go, but there's really no teeth to it. It really is just a snapshot in time, if you will. This is what the community envisions, and this is what we'd like to do. So a couple of the implementation tools that were needed right away, we needed to look at the comprehensive plan. And what we found was that it wasn't a rewrite of the comprehensive plan. We just needed to align the language and align the goals of the previous comprehensive plan with the desires that came out of this Envision plan. Along with that then comes, the comprehensive plan then becomes your policy document. So that's the document that leads the town's decision-making on a lot of those things, but you still have to have the teeth. You have to have the part that you enforce. And so the second step to that was implementing what's called a unified development ordinance. And this basically replaces what would have been a zoning ordinance and a subdivision control ordinance, puts it into one document. But this is the place then that, in Envision Ellettsville, we talked about things like what buildings should look like, what kinds of setbacks from streets, what the public right-of-way starts to look like. The comprehensive plan formulates that as policy, and then the UDO makes the requirements so that developers start to meet those standards. And what I'll say about the group here in Ellettsville is that I think they did a very good job of taking the intent of the vision plan and putting the regulations in place to sort of reinforce that and to meet its objectives, but to do so in a way that wasn't, that didn't make it so that developers didn't want to look at Ellettsville. And that's important because growth is important to the communities, the tax base. And so when you look at the Unified Development Ordinance, it achieves the visual goals, the aesthetics, those things, but it does so in a way that's pretty developer friendly. And even the processes that the town goes through to work with developers to approve things is much more streamlined and much more efficient. So those two tools in particular, which are both in place now, I believe that the UDO has been approved. Those two things are going to make it so that as we move forward, those objectives of the Envision Ellettsville plan become more and more of a reality. And so it's a real compliment to the community for the efforts that they invested. This was a significant effort that really is going to have a long-lasting impact on the community of Ellettsville.
Thank you. Are you having difficulty hearing? I keep hearing, people keep waving hands, and I didn't know it was hearing or what. So if not, it's Mr. Michael Farmer's opportunity, and we're so glad he's all dressed up for winter and none of those short breeches he was talking about.
Well, you couldn't tell, now that I think about it, you couldn't tell from here, so I should have wore shorts. Okay, well, I guess I'm to give an update on the town. Ron kind of laid it out and opened the door for me with talking about how we got to where we are today. I was going to prepare for this, but usually when I prepare, I go off script or I foul it up, so I like efficiency, so I'm just starting from scratch, and then I didn't have to work so hard. So anyway, the reason I said that is every day is the same thing but different in Ellettsville. The town's having a building boom. If you go back to kind of emphasize the update, if you go back to the 60s, the town was vibrant then. If you knew Ellettsville in the 60s, we had everything from a granary down by the bridge on Sale and Main Street to every kind of business that you can imagine was in Ellettsville. Barber shops, dentist office, insurance companies. We had a hardware store and a drug store and a couple of variety stores, 3 gas stations, full-service gas stations downtown, and churches, just everything you can imagine we had in the 60s. And so I always tell everybody in the 60s it's kind of like watching a show, one of those 60s shows on TV where they show a little vibrant town, everybody's walking to and fro and all that. It was like that in town, and that all went away. And so in the 80s and 90s, the town was just kind of moving at a flat pace. And even in the 90s, when we had some residential boom in town, it looked like we were destined to be a bedroom town to Bloomington. And so 2019 came, tricked me in being a town manager, and I said, what could happen? Nothing's happening in town. Yeah, I'll be glad to do it. And lo and behold, we had COVID, and during COVID, we had a building boom. And then in 2022, we had another building boom that involved commercial. We put more commercial services in 2022 than we had in the whole life of the town. I'm the utilities guy. And so I thought that was quite amazing. And then, so I thought, that was kind of what we expect in the future. And then lo and behold, the real building boom is now. And so what's going on in town now, I think everybody's aware. I think on the 7th, we approved a PUD for the Smithville property. They're ready to go on the first phase of their project. Across the street is a Harmon Farm. They've already broke ground. They're starting on the first phase of their project. And the Umbarger property was annexed a couple of months ago, I think. And it's been locked down by a group, and we don't know what's going to happen there yet. But there's activity on that property. That's 800 acres of active property on the west side. 40 years ago, the county government said that's where the light industrial should go in the county. And I think finally everybody kind of give up that was actually going to happen. And now we have 800 acres actively involved in improvements. So I think that we're looking at a TIF. There's a RDC, Redevelopment Commission meeting at 5 o'clock today before the town board meeting, and we're trying to put together a TIF for that area. And we think that'll help expedite and improve the type of redevelopment and development that we have out on the west side. It's very exciting. If you haven't been out there lately, I mean, you just can't believe how much activity there is. We have a 7,200-foot a medical building being built right across from the fire station. That should be open and receiving medical-type businesses sometime in the near future. I made a few notes because I knew I'd forget a whole bunch of stuff. There's a new car wash on the east side of town. It's businesses like that are popping up. Jimmy John's is getting ready to open in a couple of months. Apparently everybody's been waiting for that. We have a new coffee shop, home care, their business office they're getting ready to build right at Sale and 46 sometime in the near future. There's everything from, I got a call yesterday and I hooked them up with a local landowner, and we have a national company that's wanting to come to town, and I think they're going to do some business here, which is really exciting. But just as exciting for me is the small shops, the coffee shops, and like Hoosier or Hawaiian Hoosier. Those kind of businesses starting. We have a little business that's getting ready to start up in the next few weeks called Revive, and they do aesthetics and wellness, and it's small, unique businesses like that are starting to populate the town, and sometimes you don't even notice. They're just all of a sudden they're there. I was at the parade, and I always sit by the library, and I checking out the tattoo place that bought the little house right next to what used to be Thrasher's groceries. But I just kept looking at it, and those people took their artistry and rehabbed that house and made it like a flower in town. And just, it's things like that that are really exciting about what's happened to Ellettsville. So it's a daily event when somebody calls about wanting to relocate in Ellettsville. It's just like that. We obviously are working on the trail. It should be finished by spring. The Stewart Park will be finished by spring. I think the building, Denise, you're in here somewhere, I know you are. I think it's going to be finished before the end of the year. We hope, but we'll probably open everything up in the spring. And a really big shout out to Denise. Her grant for the Stewart Park and the Next Level Trail, I think, is a really big, big impetus to the balance of how we provide things for our constituents, like trails and parks and green spaces. I think that balance with what's going on as far as growing our town commercially and residentially, I think it really is really a big deal. Timing's everything. I think we've been really lucky about our timing coming out of the COVID, and I think we have at least 6 subdivisions where active building's going on. Sometimes a house every 2 weeks is going up. And so we have 6 different places where that's happening in town. I don't know what else to give you as an update. I mean, everybody sees, how things are going. We're planning on additional park amenities for down around the shelter house. Marty Stevens with Richland Township, he's helping with that as well. And we have all kinds of plans for improvements that will go on and on even after the trail's finished here. As you can see, we're even building just outside our building. A lot of people, I notice on social media, are worried about, are we going to expand all of our resources, and how are we going to handle all this growth? And it is a challenge. Our town we have like 5 or 6 department heads, and they have crews and people that work for them, whether it's the police department or the fire department. But really, it's kind of unique right now because we do not have a lot of staff. So when you're dealing with our department heads with all this activity, I think you need to understand that a lot of times it's one person doing this, one person doing this, one person doing this. And so sometimes our response time, we're having growing pains. So sometimes our response times are not what they should be. But as far as our utilities, in 2016, we ran another transmission main from Bloomington on the west side. So we have redundant supply of water now, which doubled our capacity. And so we use about 1 million gallons a day in Ellettsville, and our capacity is about 2.4 million, and we have 1 million gallons worth of storage as well. So our water supply is in really good shape. Our sewer plant's at 60% capacity, and we can withstand quite a bit of growth on that end. But we are doing master plans for both our water and wastewater because we need to be planning for what it's going to be like 10 years from now. And so that's all underway. I guess About the only other thing I would say is just talking about our infrastructure and how we're handling the growth. A couple of unique facts. The fire and the police in the last couple of years, combined, they go on about 9,000 runs a year. So you'll be hearing a lot about next year's budget about supporting the fire and police and making sure that we can handle the growth. I think that's all I really want to say right now. I mean, anybody has questions about what's going on in town, be glad to answer them. I'm an open door. One of the greatest things I like to do is say, hey, why don't you come take a ride with me? And we go around town, we talk. It's kind of like those late night shows that do the same thing, and I'll tell a couple jokes. And we might even sing. But it's a good way to find out what's going on if you're really interested. If you want to know how we plan, sometimes this is how we plan. I grab a piece of paper that's important probably, and we do a map or a sketch, or we write things out, and sometimes it's just like that. That's how fast-paced everything is around here. Yeah, we plan, but sometimes planning means finding something to write on and say, here it is, let's go. And so that's what's going on in Ellettsville.
So I'm sure Jennifer Pearl often wishes she had more napkins to write on than what's happening, because Jennifer does the economic development for our community and has an overview of what happens here and happens in the county, and also state laws that impact what's going on. So Jen Pearl.
Thanks. How am I doing on time?
I think you don't have to worry.
Don't worry, okay, for my 2-hour presentation. No. So I did bring some slides today, and I hope you don't mind. I'm going to wander a little bit just so I can interact with the PowerPoint that we have here. How's everybody doing today? All right. People have had their coffee. Thank you. So my name is Jen Pearl, and I'm the president of the Bloomington Economic Development Corporation. Michael and I also talk about how the E in the BEDC stands for Ellettsville, because we work with you all so much. We're a nonprofit, and we serve all of Monroe County in spurring economic development, and that's conditions for prosperity across the community. The BEDC team, we're working to grow and attract quality employers to diversify our employment base and raise wages for our community. You may be familiar with our team. 2 of us are here today. Stacy in the back is on our team. And then many of you know Clark Reiner, who's also a member of the Ellettsville Chamber Board. And then Christy Watson, who is a member of the Ellettsville community. So we have really deep ties. We serve all of Monroe County as a nonprofit, and we work with all 3 of our local jurisdictions and private sector companies across the community. Just a quick overview of what I'm going to go over today. The first 3 parts are really people, wages, and land use. Really important components to prosperity. We'll talk about items to watch and Ellettsville's opportunities moving forward. So first, people. Monroe County is really a hub for both talent and employment in our region. We have about 17% of our workforce actually travels in from outside of Monroe County. We have around 93,000 people in our workforce. Where are we headed in the future? You may have heard the IU Indiana Business Research Center recently released a projection for how population growth is going to go from 2020 to 2050. We just want to get the bad news out of the way first, so I'm just going to start with that. Everything that you see here, I don't know if this pointer works, everything that you see on the map that's in blue is growth. Everything that's in orange is shrinking. You can see where Monroe County is here in the orange, south of Indianapolis. That is our prime workforce population from 2020 to 2050. If you look at the projections for our community, for Monroe County, our over 65 population is slated to grow by 48% during that time. That will include me during that period of time. So I'm in those statistics. Our Monroe County workforce population is slated to shrink by just over 4%, and our under 20 population is supposed to shrink in Monroe County by 10%. during that time. So obviously, you have baby boomers that are retiring, you've had life expectancy that has gone down, as have birth rates. Those are the sources for where this is headed. But again, these are projections for the future. This is the ghost of Christmas future. It doesn't necessarily have to be this way. I titled this presentation today, Growing Seeds of Growth in Ellettsville, because there are a lot of seeds of opportunity in this community. If you look at Ellettsville's population growth, and this is data that I pulled, it's actually readily available on the BEDC website. If you go to bloomingtonedc.com, go to the menu and there's a data center. All of these community statistics are available for Monroe County, for Ellettsville, and for Bloomington. So what you can see here in the Ellettsville population growth is actually from 2024 to 2029, a projected growth of 0.38%. I mean, that's not tons of growth, but if you compare that to Bloomington and Monroe County, Bloomington and Monroe County are supposed to be flat or shrink during that time, where you see the addition of around 130 people in in Ellettsville. So that is an opportunity. Another opportunity that you see is sort of the age bands that we have. Again, this is available on our website, where you see some of the largest age groups in Monroe County and Bloomington are in that college age range. You don't have the same large college population in Ellettsville, but what you do have is a sizable portion of the community that's ages 30 to 39. That's where the blue arrows are pointing on here. And that's a huge opportunity, because if you look towards the bottom of the chart, the over 60 population, yes, there is a portion of the population in Ellettsville that's headed towards retirement, and that's something that needs to be addressed, but that is an opportunity that other communities do not have. And if you look at the scale here, we're talking about in the hundreds of people. So, another opportunity for Ellettsville. What about wages and income? So recently, last week, the IU, Indiana Business Research Center, they did a presentation called Futurecast. It was over at Ivy Tech. And Phil Powell from IU talked about wage growth in our community. If you look at the big picture, Monroe County, for the entire county, our wages lag behind the state and national averages. Monroe County workers on average earn $1,037 a week. That's 89% of the state average and 72% of the national average. So we've been catching up in recent years, but we still lag. That is an opportunity that we need to lean into. But again, we see some promise in Ellettsville. Just by show of hands, if you had to guess median household income, which jurisdiction has the highest median household income? Is it Monroe County, Bloomington, or Ellettsville? So by show of hands, is it highest median income in Monroe County? Highest median income in Bloomington? Highest median income in Ellettsville? For those of you that voted Ellettsville, you are right. So again, this data is available on our website, but Ellettsville stands head and shoulders above Bloomington and Monroe County. You can see here the median household income in Ellettsville is around $98,000 compared to $51,000 in Bloomington and $67,000 in Monroe County. Yeah, round of applause for that. Now, you can sort of, some of the presumptions there are that the student population is dragging that down in Monroe County and in Bloomington. But again, this is an opportunity because earlier, I know, Ron, you talked about tax income. Michael talked about, opportunities for growth and investment in Ellettsville. The health and the wealth of your households here are a really important piece of this puzzle. So that is another seed of opportunity. Next, we'll talk about land use. I know Ron talked about this with the Envision Ellettsville plan and what is planned for growth in the community here. We have a well-documented housing need across our county, but also across Indiana and nationally as well. There's a bit of promise that's come through. What you can see on this chart here is Monroe County home sales for October 2024. This is for the entire county. And in the upper left with the yellow arrow, the median home sales prices for October were $288,000. That's the median price for which it was sold. If you look, the dotted line is 2023, the solid line is 2024. So year over year, home sale prices are down about 10%. We also, as of October, have roughly a 4.4 month inventory of homes on the market. That means if you stop adding more homes on the market today, it will take about 4.4 months to sell them all off. That's moved in a positive direction because it used to be smaller. However, a healthy market, you still need around 5 to 6 months of inventory. So moving in a good direction and hoping to see more. If you look at Ellettsville by comparison, the home prices, I'm going to go back for a second. Ellettsville's median home value this year was around $264,000. That's median home value. And in Bloomington, the median home value is around $294,000. So that's a difference of about $30,000. So it's really encouraging to hear, Michael mentioned all of the housing developments that are coming in. That will certainly be very important moving forward. Now, show of hands, as we talk about land use, or actually please just shout out what you think. What are some of the benefits in a community if you are within the bounds of Ellettsville, developing housing and employment inside the bounds of Ellettsville? What are some of the community benefits to that?
Tax revenue.
Tax revenue. Services. Yes. Utilities. Yes.
Short commute time.
Short commute time. Yes. Yeah, less traffic. More traffic or less traffic?
More.
More traffic. Other benefits. All right, so you hit on a lot of them. And this is why we talk about economic development. Why do we want to make sure we're fostering both employment growth and housing growth in the community? One is quality of life that's tied to shorter commutes. It's tied to services in a community. It's tied to just having a strong community that's there and not a community that shrivels on the vine because it ages out. You have limits on sprawl. We've seen more and more people move outside of Monroe County just to find attainable housing. And if you're able to build housing in the community, that means people aren't, driving further to work. That's also positive for, environmental sustainability as well. You have increased revenue for local government, which was hit on. And the biggest piece of this is you have tools for talent attraction and retention. And that is critical based on what we're seeing with the numbers in aging populations. So items to watch moving forward. I know one of the things that I was asked to touch on today was the Monroe County Development Ordinance. Who here has heard about the CDO? In some way, fantastic. So as you know, these are updates to zoning and the zoning map across Monroe County in the unincorporated areas outside of Bloomington and Ellettsville. This is the first complete update that Monroe County has done since 1997. And I do want to give a shout out to county planning and to planning commission because this is a major endeavor. There have been some very positive things that have come out of it. They've simplified and reduced the number of zones. They have a much more easier to follow code that they've put into place as well. They had public comments that they accepted in September and October this year. And the BEDC, we were very proud to team up with the Ellettsville Chamber, as well as the Bloomington Chamber, BASCI, the Builders Association, BBOR, the Realtors, and Monroe County Habitat as well. And we pulled together a white paper with public comments on the CDO. Some of the biggest recommendations that we had, or the needs that we saw, were the needs for an updated comprehensive plan. Shout out to Ellettsville for having an updated comprehensive plan. Also, needs for bolstering attainable housing through smaller parcels of land, through infrastructure enhancements and sewer, as well as revisions to sliding scale subdivisions, because you're seeing these large properties that maybe used to be farms or something that people have had a difficulty subdividing due to limitations on them, as well as the need for clear and quick permitting and development processes. Over the last month, the Plan Commission has been reviewing public comments and deciding what to do with them. Next week on the 19th, there's going to be a public meeting where they're going to review what they plan to do moving forward and vote to send that along to the Monroe County Commissioners for final approval. Based on what we've heard, the goal is to have that completed by the end of this year. So yet to be seen what will end up happening with any revisions. But if you go to monroecdo.com, that's monroecdo.com, you can see all of the public comments, you can see the documents, the maps, and they continue to post updates there, including meetings. Keep an eye on that because honestly, that's a really big opportunity for Ellettsville. We have seen in recent years with some of the growth that's been restricted in Monroe County, growth many times is like water, and it flows to where it can go. And so many of the things that Ellettsville has been doing and putting into place has been just fertile ground for, opportunities for development in the community here. In terms of other opportunities, other items to watch, obviously federal and state elections are one thing to watch. I wish I had a crystal ball for you. I do not have that today. That is another presentation. Things to watch include IU's investments in growth, especially in things like microelectronics and quantum computing, AI, advanced research. Recently, there was the announcement for a quantum corridor, which is a high-speed fiber network that would actually run from Chicago all the way through to NSWC Crane, as you see here on the map. That's actually a public-private partnership that's being spearheaded by an IU alum. And the opportunity there is to really supercharge fiber in a way that enables, more research and other industries to come in. So that is an opportunity to watch, especially because Ellettsville has such amazing resources in Smithville and others in the area. Other things to watch is our growing life sciences industry. Simtra, which used to be called Baxter, continues to grow in Monroe County. They had a $225 million investment earlier this year, and they've been hiring hundreds of people. The BDC's been really proud to work with them on their further investment in the community. And then you're also seeing Catalent, which is currently going through an acquisition process with Novo Nordisk. We've heard very positive signals so far on how that looks. They're hoping to wrap that acquisition up by the end of this year. So that is another item to watch. And based on that, where can Ellettsville go from here? So we know that communities thrive when they have a shared vision, they lean into their strengths, and they coordinate their investments. Ron already covered that earlier. And this is where Ellettsville, I think, stands head and shoulders above other communities, because not every community has a plan like that. Not every community is working on implementation, as Michael was saying, it's full speed ahead, which is so impressive. We also know that talent attraction, housing, and job growth all go hand in hand. So I know the BDC team has been very proud to work alongside partners here in Ellettsville to figure out, based on the vision that's here, okay, what can we attract? So building on the Envision Ellettsville plan and the comp plan and the UDO and the plans for industrial development on the west side, what does Ellettsville want to see here so that when there's groups like ours that are trying to attract businesses for the community, we can make sure it's as best a fit as possible. So I will leave it at that and look forward to further discussion. Thank you.
So earlier, Michael talked about TIF districts, and we have Ron here to help us think about how that happens and the opportunities that come with TIF districts.
Okay. So let's do another show of hands. How many people know what a TIF district is? How many people understand how they work? Okay, so those are the resources you may want to go to after I share a couple things with you, because they may be able to help you more so than I. So my caveat is I am not an attorney and I am not a financial advisor. So keep those things in mind as I sort of talk here, and I'm going to make this kind of quick. The idea of a TIF district, TIF is a tool that communities can use to help them attract development and to help pay for some of the costs that come with that development. So let's say, for instance, there's a hotel that's going to develop in downtown Ellettsville. So a developer comes in, they're gonna put in this hotel, it's all great, it's gonna be the type of character you want, it's gonna attract people, it's gonna serve as a hub, you're all excited about it. However, the town looks at it and says, well, when they do this, I'm gonna have to put X number of dollars into rebuilding roads to get to it, I'm gonna have to connect utilities to it, I'm gonna have to put up new lighting, I'm gonna have lots of things that I have to do, and suddenly, everybody who is excited about the development's now a little nervous because they're looking at a bill that comes to the town for those public facilities. So a TIF district works roughly this way, and I say roughly. First of all, a community has to have a redevelopment commission in order to be able to undertake the TIF financing. And Ellettsville does have that. And what you go about doing to set up a tax increment financing district is you have to set up a boundary. So you look at what the area of potential impact is going to be for that new development. In other words, you're trying to answer the question, when this new development goes in, what's that impact on the tax base and how big will that be? So you do have to establish the boundaries of a district in order to do this. So once the district is established, you create what's kind of known, or what I would call like your base tax amount. So let's say you established a district today. You would look at the taxes that are brought in from that district, and if today they're bringing in, and I'm making the number up, let's say $100, your base tax rate for that district is the $100. So no matter what you do with the TIF, that $100, that first $100 that comes in still goes to what it initially was intended to go. So a portion of that likely goes to schools, to libraries, to other things. But what happens is once that, what you're projecting is that once that new use is there, that tax rate is going to go from where the base rate is, it's going to start to creep up, and you're going to start having additional tax revenue coming in. And that's the increment part of tax increment financing. And what that projection then allows a community to do is to use that money to do the public infrastructure improvements that are needed to help attract that development. There are some scenarios where it can be used for private development. I don't know the details of those. There's some other limitations on what that money can be used for. But there's two ways then that a community can use it. So, for instance, we're working in Mooresville, Indiana right now, and what Mooresville's been doing is every time that extra tax comes in, they put it in a checking account and or a savings account, and it just keeps building. And they're now sitting on a pot of $12 million that they can use to fund other projects. And the reason they did it that way was because they didn't know what they were going to use the money for. They didn't have specific projects, but they knew it would be downtown improvement. The way most communities use that, I think, is that once it's been certified that that tax increment is going to be X number of dollars, the community can then take out bonds or basically get a loan for an amount of money based on the fact that that lender knows that over the next 10 to 20 years, there's a amount of money that will cover the liabilities on that loan. Does that make sense? So what you're really doing is you're taking that base tax rate and you're trying to find a way to use what the increased tax rate will be once that new development impacts that district. And a TIF district has a limit on it, so there is a boundary to it. You have to establish the boundary, and there's a limit of 20 or 25 years that it can be in place. So it is not an indefinite established financing tool.
Thank you. Now it's time for questions from you. So can I see hands or stand up and make your questions so that we can hear? Thank you. Or you can write them down on cards. Yeah. So one of the things that I've wondered about is your annexation. You know, in Bloomington, people do not want to be annexed, and in Ellettsville, that seems to be the thing to do. So Michael, how does this happen?
Well, it's all voluntary in Ellettsville. I think there's no case for involuntary annexation. It's almost impossible to do anyway. But we always like to tell everybody when they move into the Ellettsville area and they want to annex their property into town, we always have the attitude, what can we do to help, and not to dictate how things are going to be after you're annexed into town and under the rule of the town's government. I mean, it's no secret that one of the reasons the town's kind of a hot commodity in Monroe County right now is, you know, Bloomington, they're doing their own thing, they're growing in their own way, and there's a lot of opportunity to build there a specific type of development. But when you think of open ground, you have to go to the county, and the county seems to be very restrictive. I think they want the rural to stay rural, as they say, and they don't take into account that limiting growth in the county dumbs down the ability for people to have housing and places to live, and it creates a cost of living problem based on the fact that land's short supply and there's nowhere to live. So I think their restrictive attitude towards land has pushed everybody to look at Ellettsville for growth. Timing's everything. We're ready for growth. We're always a little behind the curve, but the fact is, like I said, 40 years ago, they designated the west side of Ellettsville for growth, and everybody's coming here and annexing because it's easy and we help, and we want to promote development.
So how do you get information? How does the public get information about what's happening in the community since we no longer have newspapers? How do you know what's happening in Ellettsville?
Do you want me to answer that?
You can.
Well, you have to come see me and drive around with me. So, well, it's kind of like that. I mean, we had the town had we have we have a website, and it doesn't get very many hits. And websites are kind of a billboard that has information on it, but it's not real interactive, I guess. It can be, but I'm not sure it is. But you have social media out there, which I'm totally against. But it's the way everybody connects these days. I still read the newspaper. I don't know if you noticed, but I'm a little older than most people in here. And I still read the newspaper, and I get little snippets and bits of information out of it. And so it's not real current, but it is helpful. But most people use social media. So Hi Neighbor, we get, I think on our website, we get like 1,000 hits or something. Hi Neighbor's got like 14,000, 15,000 people that pay attention to it. And then you have Facebook, which is just everywhere. And so we started a Facebook. Denise, don't say anything. I always call it a page, but we're on Facebook, I guess is the way you say it. And recently we had to curtail that. And I'll not go into detail about that, but we're going to bring it back to help with what's happening in Ellettsville. But it's really hard to get the news out. I would say if you're interested in development of the town, you need to really pay attention to our agendas, whether it's Plan Commission, Redevelopment Commission, or the town board, to stay up with what's going on. But it is a challenge to keep everybody informed, and I hear a lot about that. We don't know what's going on. I mean, I got a couple people that I work with a lot, and they go, well, I know you know what's going on, and it's in your head, but we need to know what's going on. So it's a challenge right now.
Jen?
I think that that's one of the more important things that needs to be addressed, is to have that what Facebook page or whatever, when it was active, it was very good. We knew what was going on. And I think, you know, you look at the resources that we have of people that should be a position that should be filled pretty quickly.
I agree, we're working on it.
You know, like I said, I look back, I'm the same age you are, Mike. It used to be the Journal, then, you know, sort of the Herald Times, telephone, whatever. And now there's nothing, and I'm involved in a lot of groups, and that's always the issue of how do we tell people what we're doing? How do we tell, how do we find out what somebody else is doing? We plan some events and come to find out, there's 2 other events, maybe one at the school and one that's somewhere else. Both important, but we don't know. So I think that is one thing that really needs to be addressed, is getting a central, central hub of information. And like I said, there's plenty of resources here in town, you know, to reach out and find someone who could do that.
I agree. The other thing that really exasperates the situation is it is very fast-paced right now. I mean, things happen every day. There's not a lot of time, for instance, with the TIF, big surprise, but I'm in favor of pushing that through sooner than later so we can capture money sooner than later. But it's very fast-paced around here, so sometimes the information getting out means you better pay attention for tomorrow, not give you, I mean, lead times of 2 weeks or 2 months or 2 years they're scarce right now to be able to give you any lead at all because it's so fast paced around here. I mean, I keep telling everybody it's like the Oklahoma land rush here, and everybody they're not driving out to where they want to develop. They got all 6 horses running hard and everything's falling out of the wagon as they get there. It's just like that. And so it's hard to keep everybody informed. It's hard to even remember to inform people sometimes because our staff, like I said, there's not many of us. And so we're dealing with point on, just yes, you know, dealing with people, dealing with whatever's right in front of our face, and being able to take a minute and think, oh, you know, I probably ought to put this out for consumption and information. It gets lost in the fact that it's next. You hardly get a body break or a coffee break to even think about doing stuff like that. So it's not an excuse, it's just the way it is. And so anyway, but we are working on social media and getting the word back out there. And I highly recommend Hi Neighbor because they can find your dog or tell you what's getting ready to get built on the west side of town. I mean, they got it covered, so.
What about other communities in which you work, Ron? How do they get the news?
Well, so the downfall of the newspaper is a pretty significant difference now than what it used to be. And so that the idea that you sort of had this public forum that was independently run was a way to make sure that you got that news, not just to have the news, but to keep the government in check, right? To make sure that that's one of the ways that we held our public officials accountable. In some of the communities we go to, we see a lot of that being done on their web pages. And they'll have, the only way to do it that way is to have a dedicated person or a staff that is able to react quickly and to post things and to keep things updated. If it's done right, you can link to all of these different projects that are going on. You can link to the agendas or the meeting notes, or even here in Ellettsville, if you want to go back and look at the town council meeting from June of this year, you can go and find it. So there's some efforts that need to happen to coordinate all of that. But the flip side to that is that in a lot of those communities, what happens is that same person or that same staff is also doing the social media. And the downside of social media is that it doesn't, things that are put out there by people doesn't have to be factual, doesn't have to be correct. All it has to just sit there, one comment comes in and it starts a wildfire, and then that staff spends all their time doing, like putting out that wildfire instead of keeping things updated. So I think all of that digital area is tough because it's pretty time consuming and it's hard to keep updated.
And Jen, I know your department does a great job of keeping that up to date, and I'm just amazed at all the things I can do with your website.
Oh, thank you. I don't know that I have too much else to add, although whenever we're working on a project that's coming into the community, we, to the extent that a client is, willing and open to doing this, we work on a strategic communications plan with them. Who do they need to be talking to one-on-one in the community, what other businesses, what other stakeholders. So we work very closely with them on that. I do actually have a question for the audience, if that.
Of course.
Okay, so, as we talk about, especially opportunities west of Ellettsville, my question for the audience is what, if you have your magic wand, what would be wonderful to go out in that employment area that Ron had mentioned and that I know you're looking at the TIF district for? What would be a great thing to go out there? Because as we work with, business attraction for the community, we try to go after opportunities as much as possible that fit within the community vision. That doesn't always pan out. Sometimes it just depends who comes in the door and, what deals come in the door. But as much as possible, we would like to shape things within the vision of the community. What would you all like to see west of Ellettsville? Yeah?
Sit-down restaurants, not fast food. Mm-hmm.
I know people have opinions.
Costco.
A Costco? Okay. Costco? So I know we're talking about retail. Some of that is in other districts of the community. We're talking, so the employment zone on the west side, that's a bit more industrial. I hear people talking, so I know people have, have thoughts, but you're not shouting them out. And this might be a question perhaps for Jill and for Liz and others, is how can we best work with the chamber, and other partners in the community to better shape what it is that we are going after. Because the last thing that we want to do is, say we go after an attraction target and you bring them into the community and then it runs into the buzzsaw of a public meeting. That's not ideal for anybody. And so the more feedback that we can get along the way to help advise clients and others, then those are great opportunities.
So one of the items from the Future Quest that just kind of surprised and shocked me was the growth of our community and the fact that we are growing with older folks, but we're losing young people. So how do we keep young people in our community? Now I know with great pride, Ivy Tech says that our students, 92 to 44%, stay in the state of Indiana. But that's not happening around here. So how do we attract and keep our young people here? What can we better do?
Well, I think it's actually happening now. The Harmon Farm project is 450 different residential units, a commercial component with that as well. And they are building a planned a village where you can recreate and have green spaces and trails. And then when you add to that the Smithville project, their first phase is a tech park. And so they're going to provide space and buildings that will allow for people to relocate here with their businesses that have to do with technology, which, you know, seems to be the wave of the future. And so I think those two projects are actually going to go together, and they're going to create housing and livability along with places to work as well. And with, you know, and I would say, so that area being TIF'd so we can actually enhance and expedite some of this growth, I think will help with that. And going back to the TIF, I mean, some of the things that, we have a list of things we want to do in the TIF district on the west side. And some of those things, if you think about these planned projects at the Harmon Farm and Smithville, they have time frames, and they do this, and then I think cash flow says then we can do the next phase. And so with things like TIF, you can help with a three-way light on the highway, maybe two. That's in the plan for both these projects. And so if we have TIF monies and we can make that happen in year 3 instead of year 7, it expedites what happens out there as far as growth. It puts, I mean, if you put 2 lights in, you put 8 corners for those kind of businesses that you want, like either restaurants or high visibility national chains that allow you to not go out of the community to get what you need for day-to-day living. And with a tech park, I mean, I'm not, they're talking about 10 buildings to start out with, so I'm not sure, you know, I'm not sure what that's going to do. I think what we're doing in town to help is to make it livable and have recreation places. And I mean, if you look out there, they're getting ready to pave tomorrow, and we'll be like at 70% done with the trail after that. And so the trails, I can't believe how much the trails help. Denise and I did a demonstration of an AI group that can bring information to you that tells you why people come and why people stick around and we did one for the trail, the Karst Trail. We just did it as an experiment just to see if we might want to use a tool like that. And come to find out, most of the people were like 50 miles away. That was the most people that came to that trail. I mean, there was a large concentration of local people as well, and then it showed you where they went from there to eat or drink coffee or had stopped by Walmart. And it was just amazing what you can do to create economic growth. And I think, you know, I think that's the big player here as far as well, anyway, I'll just
We have one brave person back here. Can I?
Yeah, I think when it comes to what type of businesses do we want on the west side, I don't think a lot of us have an opinion about it. We want businesses on the west side. We're concerned with when those businesses show up. If you come to Ellettsville, you can eat fast food or pizza, and that's it. We need more places, more variety. When it comes to shopping, you have the IGA, or you drive into Bloomington to go to one of the 80 Krogers, Walmart, or Target. We want more of those options here to build into this community. If we're adding all of this residential, if we're adding all of these businesses, what are the plans for more variety in the restaurant choices? I love pizza, but we have more pizza, I think, per capita than anywhere else. I love that we have a new business in Bigby Coffee coming in, but that gives us 4 coffee shops in Ellettsville. We want the more sit-down restaurants. We want more of that, and we need more shopping. We need a Meijer, a Costco, or something like that out here.
Then you need density. And with density comes some of those, there's a lot of chains. I don't know for sure, but I think like 10,000 population is where you start being those attractive places to bring some of those chains in for restaurants. And, we need a couple anchors. We've been trying to get a brew house with a restaurant. I just keep saying that kill here if somebody lands here. So we've got some tools that we can use once we establish a TIF downtown as well. And that would help, but really density is what you want. So when you look at housing, you need different types of housing, townhouses, apartments. Some of our board's not real excited about apartments, but they bring density. And I think that's the key to having restaurants. If you have density, and I do believe the town's going to grow faster than the projections that Jen was showing, just because, we're building 125 to 150 houses a year, and I think that's going to expedite when these 2 projects get going on the west side, so that density will help that.
Did we have other questions over here? Yes.
You were asking about how do we keep young people in our community. Something that our Edgewood schools are doing is we've developed a business leaders advisory team, and so we invite members of the leadership in our businesses such as Smithville and Cook Medical and IU Health and People's State Banks here and others, and we connect those business leaders with our students who are running student-run businesses. And so we're building relationships so that so when these young people are going to be going out into the workforce, first of all, they're prepared because we've listened to our local businesses and what they look for in employees. And secondly, we've started establishing relationships between those business leaders and our students. So when our students are thinking about going out into the workforce, that they've already established a relationship with those businesses. And so we hope down the road that pays off for keeping our young people here in our local town of Ellettsville.
That's a great idea. Thank you. Jill, I see you.
Yes, we are running out of time. But we could go ahead and do a few more questions.
Okay,
Just
Marty
real quick.
has one.
Well, I just was going to piggyback on what somebody else had mentioned about restaurants, sit-down restaurants. If we want our young people to stay here, they're accustomed to maybe stopping in after work for dinner, perhaps a cocktail, whatever. There is no place, tell me in Ellettsville, people will say, well, where are you going to go out to eat? Because after 2 o'clock, where are you going to go to eat? And they don't all want to go to a fast food restaurant. And so I think as a group, we surely could find an area where we could help support a restaurant in or very near Ellettsville.
I agree, but you got to be patient, and coming from me, that's like he never says be patient. But you have to be patient on timing's everything, and I think the timing is right around the corner.
I think we have support for a sit-down restaurant even before you grew anymore to the west. Because if you're following social media, that's all you hear. No place to eat after 2 o'clock. And
So we had another question in the back.
No, I just, when going back to what's going to keep the young people here, not everybody likes to drink. And if you go to Bloomington, that's all that's there, So you got to give them activities to do where maybe the people that like to drink can drink, people that don't drink don't have to. And I'm just going like Top Golf, places like that. That keeps activities here. A lot of people travel from here to go to Indy, so much so that they opened the second one closer to Bloomington from the south side. You know, it's things like that that keeps people coming in because they can communicate, they can talk, they can play. Businesses can rent and take, you know, employees out. Things like that is what we're missing around here for keeping people here.
That's one of the reasons we're having a 10-week concert series next summer that will allow for that density and to and fro where people go. There's a lot of traffic over here. We ought to capture that. So
And
working on it.
Ron has a comment.
Yeah, so interestingly, here in Ellettsville, we know the answer to the question. We've asked a couple times what keeps people here, and we know the answer from that process. So we had a young professionals stakeholder group that were people who had just recently graduated and either were living and working in Ellettsville or they had gone away and come back. And we asked those questions about what it is you come back, and it always came back to three things. So the three things we heard, the quality of life issues are always one. They want trails and sidewalks and connectivity and coffee shops and things they can walk to. So there's a quality of life issue. The second thing that was very important to them, and again, the whole plan sort of, it seems like every time we talked, it comes back to this, it's affordable housing. The perception is that in Ellettsville, I can get me a reasonable sized house with a fenced-in backyard, a place to put a playground for my kids, and I can raise a family here. So affordable housing availability was the second one. The third one then was the unique places, like you mentioned, the drinking. Instead of living here in Ellettsville and going to Bloomington because you want to go to the brewery or the restaurant or the unique thing, how is it that you create a center of gravity in Ellettsville that makes it so that everybody in Bloomington and the county around wants to come here to this unique place, this unique restaurant or microbrewery? And so that was part of the targeting of the central business district and how you start to attract some of those things back to the downtown area and create sort of this new, vibrant, unique place that is Ellettsville.
We want to be respectful of everyone's time. So if you have additional comments, you can email the chamber, you can email any of our panelists. Please join me in a round of applause for our wonderful moderator and the panelists. On behalf of the Ellettsville Chamber of Commerce, thank you all for joining us today. And we hope you will join us on November 22nd for our power luncheon featuring CDR Martinez, Commanding Officer of NSA Crane, sponsored by the Hawaiian Hoosier. Please also mark your calendars for our holiday open house on Tuesday, December 10th from 4 to 6. Thank you all for being here today.